is good, everybody? Welcome to the Gold Standard NFL Weekly Recap Show. I'm your host, Rob Stats Guerrera. He's your co-host, Levin Black. I feel like that sounds meaner than I want it to. And usually I'm okay sounding mean to you. But that we're equal hosts on the show is what I'm implying there.
Equal in some ways, unequal in other ways.
So we got a lot to talk about on today's show. There's head coaching news all over the place. It's Black Monday. We'll talk about who's fired, who was not.
My Monday?
Yeah, right. We'll talk about who was hired, who was fired, some candidates that are out there. We're going to get into an MVP discussion, and we'll take a look at the playoff matchups as well. Let's start right off the bat. The biggest head coach I saw fired today was Super Bowl champion Doug Pederson, who gets canned by the Jacksonville Jaguars. But, Levin, our old friend, Trent Baalke, somehow, like an NFL cockroach, survives disasters. Trent Baalke stays, Doug Pederson out in Jacksonville.
I think that says a lot more about the owner than Trent Baalke. Trent Baalke he strikes me as a big time suck up. You know what I mean? He's a big time, oh yes, sir, whatever you want owner. And well, if he gets stuck around with as bad as they are, that says a lot about the owner. That's my take on that. Like, Baalke's going to want to stay employed as long as he can be employed. It's up to the owner to say, this roster sucks, and this guy's been around long enough.
Trent Baalke is going to make his 6th head coaching hire as a general manager. Jim Harbaugh, Jim Tomsula, Chip Kelly, Urban Meyer, and Doug Pederson. Like, dude, at some point, it's you. It's not the head coach. Like, this guy just survives, man.
Let's look at it this way. He hired Jim Harbaugh. Now, did he hire Jim Harbaugh? No. Jim Harbaugh chose them.
Right.
Jim Harbaugh was incredibly sought after. And it didn't hurt that Harbaugh was coaching in Stanford, and it was the 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
After that fact, what do you got? Oh, Tomsula, horrendous hire. Chip Kelly, maybe even worse of a hire. Urban Meyer, maybe the worst hire in NFL history. And then Doug Pederson.
Pederson was only 7 games under 500. He's the best of the bunch.
Right. It's insane that this guy's getting to pick. The guys that he actually got to select as a head coach, you can maybe throw out Tomsula because as 49er fans, we know that might have been a Jed York call.
Mm-hmm. I think he had a lot to say, though.
I think he had a lot to say, but you could say Chip Kelly was him, and you can say Urban Meyer was him. And then you can say Doug Pederson was him, although I think at the time Doug Pederson was an obvious choice. Super Bowl winning head coach, things went south after the Super Bowl. Why not? You know, I don't give him negative marks for trying out Pederson. And let's be honest, this is the Jaguars, and at the time they were a dumpster fire. They'd gotten rid of all their top talent. So being able to hire anybody of Pederson's caliber was a win for them. I think they're going to struggle to get a good coach this year.
I completely agree with you. And somebody pointed out, I can't find the tweet to bring it up, but Trent Baalke got his last 2 GM jobs because the guy that had the job ahead of him got fired. So he kind of just like fell into those roles. And yet he somehow keeps getting to pick head coaches. I agree with you. I thought Doug Pederson was a good hire by the Jags at the time. To be fair, they had a young quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. Doug Pederson had done some good work in Philadelphia with some quarterbacks. You thought maybe that was a marriage. They weren't getting any better, though, clearly. Trevor Lawrence's play did not, in my eyes, get any better. To me, he was the exact same quarterback he always was. And I'm fine with them deciding to go in a different direction from Doug Pederson, but they're not really going in that different of a direction because they still have Trent Baalke there. Like, they should have cleaned house. They should have just started fresh. And so I just think that they're going to be right back here in a couple years, except Trent Baalke probably won't survive that one, and then they'll need a head coach and a GM.
If you are a head coach candidate this cycle, and you get contacted by the Jaguars,
say no.
Why would you? Like, not only are the Jaguars a bad spot because they have a terrible quarterback contract with the quarterback coming off injuries and clearly not realizing his potential, yet you're stuck with him for multiple years. You're stuck with him for unless he suddenly improves, as long as you're going to get as a head coach.
Right.
So you're looking at it's almost impossible to succeed situation. But then on top of that, you're looking at a GM that should have been fired, but hasn't been fired. So if the first season isn't good, the GM is likely getting fired. And if the GM is getting fired, a lot of the times the coach also goes because the GM candidates coming in want to hire their guy. So if you're a head coaching candidate, you're looking at this position and saying, it's not a good enough roster to win next year. And if I don't win next year, the GM is gone, and that means I'm likely gone as well. I have no interest in that position. Like they're not going to be able to hire any of the top candidates. They're not going to be high. I would say they're going to be one of those that they have a hard time getting people to even interview for them.
Mm-hmm. I would agree completely. He became the general manager in 2021, Trent Baalke. He had the first round pick that year. That was Trevor Lawrence. 1-1. Pick 1, round 1. He also picked Travis Etienne, 25th in the first round. 2022, they had a first overall pick. That was Trayvon Walker. 2023, they had the 27th overall pick. They took Anton Harrison. And in 2024, they had the 23rd overall pick. They took Brian Thomas. So not exactly like, draft expert Trent Baalke, but he's there. Doug Pederson is gone. I don't know what to expect with Doug Pederson. He's probably not going to be a head coach, I would imagine, right away, if he ever becomes a head coach again at all. Do you see him as a coordinator somewhere, as a quarterback coach somewhere? What do you do with Doug Pederson?
I feel like he's so far removed from being a coordinator. I don't really see him getting a coordinator job. If I'm Doug Pederson, it's college. I don't think he has an NFL opportunity out there at any point. You know what I mean? I don't think, he sits out this head coaching cycle and then next head coaching cycle, there'll be interest again in him as a head coach. I don't think it's there. He's failed twice now. So I think his route to redemption is go to a college program and turn it around.
We'll have to keep an eye on, obviously, what happens with Doug Pederson, but the Jags searching for another head coach after another disastrous season. Moving on to the New England Patriots. I believe that came yesterday, but Jerod Mayo out after one season. He was the handpicked successor to Bill Belichick. They went 4-13, and now the Patriots are looking for a new head coach. Seems weird to me, this one, Levin. Not because I think that Jerod Mayo is some great head coach, but let's just zoom out, right? You had the greatest head coach of all time in 2023. You went 4-13. So, the idea that Jerod Mayo was just going to turn the Patriots around, I think, was a little unrealistic. He had the exact same record as Belichick did in Belichick's last year. I don't know. I feel like maybe you give the guy that was handpicked to be the successor more than 1 year, especially with a young quarterback in Drake May, who looked pretty good when he got his chance to play. This one kind of surprised me a little bit.
It is weird because the type of season that they had was to be expected. Nobody expected them to be a winning team,
right?
Especially when they started the season with like literally their top 4 wide receivers all hurt for multiple weeks. Like this was a team decimated by injuries early in the season. You saw glimmers of hope there. So it is interesting that he's gone because you can't blame him for this season. To me, I have to look at it and go, well, why would he be fired then? And all I can come up with is the feedback from the players to Kraft was that guy is trying to be Belichick and he's not Belichick. Get him out of here. That would be my guess, is that he came in there trying to be the Belichick, the Patriot way, trying to continue and mimic Belichick. And that's not going to work. You got to be your own guy. That's why, in my opinion, it was a mistake to say we're going to hire somebody that was an understudy of Belichick, because when the all-time great leaves, you need a reset. You don't need a guy that's going to come in and try to continue, because it's not going to carry weight.
Well, not only that, but that's a mistake that several Bill Belichick assistants have made. Josh McDaniels. Of course, now I can't think of any former Patriot people.
Patricia.
Romeo Crennel, Patricia, like they all tried to be Belichick, and there's only one of those guys. And so you may be right. The other thing I thought too is, look, the reality is owners put out feelers when they're thinking of firing a head coach. They put out feelers to see who might be interested and what that could look like. If you are the Patriots and you put out feelers, say that someone like, I don't know, Ben Johnson, who, according to Pro Football Talk, he's already been requested for an interview with the Patriots. Maybe they put out feelers like Ben Johnson could be interested. Then if you're New England, you're like, all right, do we stick with Jerod Mayo and see if he can, pull it together for another year? Or do we go hire Ben Johnson with our super young quarterback who looks good? And then all of a sudden now we're cooking with gas a little bit, right? Because the reality is also this. If you have a defensive head coach, you need a stud offensive coordinator. And if you get a stud offensive coordinator, pretty soon you're going to have to find another one because that guy's going to get hired to be a head coach. And you're going to have to be in this cycle all over again. Whereas if your head coach is the offensive guy, like the 49ers with Kyle Shanahan, like the Chiefs with Andy Reid, you don't have to worry about that guy leaving for another job. So maybe the Patriots are going all in for Ben Johnson.
I feel like, it could be just simple, like Kraft realized he made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be honest. What happened with Bill Belichick and the reason why the Patriots became, I would say, the greatest dynasty of all time and why they had the greatest quarterback of all time and now the head coach of all time is because they had a defensive head coach who is a great defensive mind, had the all-time great quarterback fall in his lap. That's what it took. Because if you have a defensive head coach, you basically have to get really lucky and have that crazy franchise quarterback for it to work out. Because, like you said, the offensive coordinators are going to be hired away. If you look at the offensive coordinators the Patriots have had, are any of them who you write home about? No, Tom Brady made them. Like, Josh McDaniels is the one that probably got the most credit. And it's pretty clear that he's not that great of an offensive guy, in my opinion, because he has failed twice in other places. But you had other people. I can't remember. Charlie Weiss, that was his last name. I had Ward second. Charlie Weiss was the first guy, right? He went to Notre Dame. He found some success while he had Brady Quinn, and then it all fell apart because he didn't actually do all that great. And then he went multiple other places and failed as an offensive coordinator. Like, the reason it worked with Belichick as a defensive head coach is because the greatest quarterback of all time fell into his lap. So in hiring Mayo, it might have been that Kraft realized, look, I made a mistake. I should have hired an offensive head coach because I'm having to go find a quarterback and develop them. I can't have a defensive head coach doing that. I need an offensive head coach to develop and find my quarterback of the future.
Belichick also was not like, he was a defensive coach, like that was where his roots, but he was also very educated on the offensive side of the ball. He went and studied. He was not your typical defensive coach. It's not like, well, I'm going to control one side of the ball and just completely leave the other side of the ball to the other. Like, no, he was invested in that as well. He was a unicorn. He was a freaking unicorn. And to ask anyone else to do that or expect anyone else to do that was an error. And now the Patriots are going to be seeking another head coach. Now, whoever gets that job is not going to be the guy that follows the guy, so to speak. And that's a good position to be in. Couple other firings, not head coaches, but there were some other assistant firings. The Bengals fired defensive coordinator Lou I can never say his last name. Lou Anarumo. Someone that, a couple years ago was a very hot candidate. Bengals defense obviously this year had a ton of problems and certainly couldn't support what the offense was doing when Cincinnati was lighting everybody up on offense.
It was getting called out by Burrow. That's how bad it was.
So he is a coaching free agent. He's someone that I would like the 49ers to at least interview. But that would it's not surprising when you think of Cincinnati's defense, but it is surprising in the fact that he was a hot candidate a couple of years ago, and now he's out of a job.
Yeah, but they had to. Like, Cincinnati had an MVP caliber season from Joe Burrow, and they didn't even make the playoffs because the defense was horrendous. Like, they gave up so many points. If I'm not mistaken, the Bengals set the record for the most losses when scoring 30 plus points in an NFL season. And that was a few weeks ago that they took that title. I think they had another loss after the fact, after they had already set the record. So, like, at that point you have to, because you have to change something. When you have that good of an offensive season and you don't make the playoffs, you have an offensive head coach who you don't want to get rid of, because I don't think they have a bad head coach. I think their head coach is the right person right now. You have to make a change then on defense. Like, you can't just say, all right, hey, that season didn't go our way. Let's run it back next year. You can't run it back when you don't even make the playoffs.
So I'm just checking really quick. Let's see. Cincinnati has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I know this is great broadcasting. 6 games where they've given up at least 30 points this year.
4 was the record, because I watched a game where they tied it, and they were talking about how they tied it, and then I saw 2 more.
They've given up 25. They've given up 25.5 points per game this year. That is not ideal. Anarumo is a free agent. Cincinnati is not a great place. Like, Mike Brown, their owner, is not one that likes to shell out a lot of money for his coaching staff in particular. I don't think it's a particularly fun place to coach, because I think you're kind of doing it with one hand tied behind your back with some of the restrictions that he imposes there. If you look at some of the NFLPA player survey, there's a lot of issues that the players have with things in Cincinnati, but they do have Joe Burrow, and he honestly has a legitimate case for MVP this season. He had an incredible season. So that is attractive, like, if you come in, it's all about expectations. If you come in next year and you give up 22 points a game, which is just 3 fewer than what they allowed this season, Cincinnati may win 10 games and go to the playoffs, and you look like a hero. So it is attractive from that standpoint, I suppose.
Cincinnati is a team that could easily win 13 games next year. They're one of those teams that can jump. Because, as you said, they're going to have an offense that's supporting you if you're a defensive coordinator coming in. You have the offense there that's going to save you a couple times. But then you also look at the talent they have. They had the NFL sack leader and probably going to be the defensive player of the year in Hendrickson. So you have talent there on defense to build around. So if you're any kind of defensive coordinator, you can be mediocre and end up looking good and get a head coaching candidate possibilities in a year or two, because the offense is going to win you a lot of games, and you have elite pass rushing talent on the roster already.
Another coordinator that was fired, Ryan Grubb, offensive coordinator of the Seattle Seahawks. Thanks for everything. You're out. Mike McDonald, new head coach there, or not new, I guess he's been there now, but he's going to need a new offensive coordinator. This is the thing, Levin. I think it's very difficult for defensive head coaches to find good offensive coordinators and good offensive talent. And like I said, especially consistently, like they're going to have to do if they have a long tenure there. So now, Seattle has good wide receivers, yes. But what do they do at quarterback? What's the long-term plan there? What's the long-term offense there? I don't know, but Grubb is gone in Seattle.
It is a little surprising because I don't think they were that bad on offense. They had Jackson Smith and Jigba emerge this year, and Geno had his normal year basically. So it didn't seem like there was a huge drop off, despite Kenneth Walker not being able to stay healthy. So moving on, I feel like it must have been McDonald and him were not on the same page. Like that they did not see eye to eye on certain things, and he decided it was a difference in philosophy, not necessarily a substance. It's not necessarily the results that they had is the reason, because their offensive line is terrible, and that's not Grubb's fault. And they had a decent offense. They weren't a great offense, but I think they were as good as you can be when the offensive line is that terrible. So I feel like it had to have just been those two did not do well when it came to like team meetings and team prep, in terms of what they saw as being, hey, you can support my defense by doing these things. And Grubb was like, well, I don't want to do those things. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like to me.
And Seattle won 10 games this year. They were 10-7. It's not like this was a pitiful team. The Rams finished 10-7 and won the division. Now, I think your criticism of the offensive line is 100% accurate. It's terrible. The offensive line has not been good there. So that's obviously an important thing. And maybe you felt like there was some sort of philosophical difference and that was never going to get any better under Grubb. But it wasn't like Seattle had a terrible season, but they are going to be searching for another offensive coordinator. How about this? The Seahawks, I didn't realize, went 7-1 on the road this year. Just 3-6 at home for Seattle. 7-1 on the road. Kind of surprising.
It is. I mean, they had the best home field advantage through the 2010s. So
Mhm.
it is surprising that it's flipped the other way. It is. It's one of those unquantifiable things because you don't know whether a player is this way or not until you have them in the building.
Mhm.
But some players, yeah, they do better with the routine of being on the road because there's no distractions. You know what I mean? It's all about the team because you're stuck in a hotel and you're not at home. You don't, some people, yeah, they have a bunch of kids. So when they're playing in a home game, they have distractions there. I hate to say it, but yes, your family can be a distraction to you. And when they go on the road, it's better.
Now let's take a look at some teams that have head coaching vacancies we knew about, but who they're reportedly interested in interviewing. And let's start with the New York Jets, Levin, who basically want to interview every coach ever. Let me just read a list of names that the Jets are either going to interview or have interviewed or are reported to want to interview. Brian Griese, quarterback coach of the 49ers. Matt Nagy, Josh McCown, Rex Ryan, Brian Flores, Joe Brady, Vance Joseph, Aaron Glenn, Arthur Smith, and Bobby Slowick. One name not on that list, Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, the hottest candidate out there, the one guy you thought every team would want to interview, not on the Jets list, at least of right now. Who knows? They may have added 6 more by the time we get done with the show.
I mean, it could be saving face too. As you said, they put out feelers. It could be Ben Johnson has said, "Don't contact me, bro." And that he has no interest, so they're not putting him on their list. Because if you have Ben Johnson on the list and he doesn't actually interview, that's a big red neon sign that Ben Johnson said no to you, even interviewing. That you weren't worth his time because he would rather stay in offensive coordinator than have a chance at your head coaching vacancy. It's one of the might be the least attractive head coaching vacancy because one, the way they did Saleh was dirty. And it seems like, I mean, it was Rich Eisen who I actually threw this theory out there. And he's not the type to throw things out because he works for the NFL. That Woody Johnson has a ton of English friends from having a role there in his personal life, having business associates and all that. They played in a London game. They know that Woody Johnson had a suite with all of his high-level business friends, and they got embarrassed in London, and Saleh was surprise fired the next day. So, like, if I'm a head coach, I'm like, I'm not going to go be a head coach and risk my livelihood on somebody who's a petulant child and is going to, at the drop of a hat, fire me because I embarrassed him in front of his friends.
Right. Remember, Woody Johnson was the United States ambassador to the United Kingdom from 2017 to 2021. So clearly there's context there. Plus, there's stories of him vetoing trades because the guy they're getting doesn't have a high enough Madden rating. Yeah, it's not a great opening. Like, the Jets have been a dumpster fire for most of my adult life.
And there's Aaron Rodgers. And that's the thing. Like, if I'm a head coach, I don't want to deal with him.
Yeah, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be there next year.
Did you see what Rex Ryan said?
No, what did he say?
He said that if I'm hired, I will end the country club for Aaron Rodgers.
I mean, first of all, from a selfish standpoint, as someone who enjoys the NFL and doesn't have any rooting interest in the Jets, I want them to hire Rex Ryan again so bad. He's so much fun when he's not your head coach. He's so interesting. He says all kinds of cool stuff. He was on the radio in New York today talking about he's the best candidate for the job. I got the audio right here. Here, let me pull it up. This is from ESPN New York. This is Rex Ryan, who goes on the radio and talking about his candidacy with the Jets.
You think you're going to get this job, right? You think you're going to be the next head coach of the Jets?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely, I do. And the reason I think I'm going to get it is because I'm the best guy. And it ain't close. The thing that you have to do, you have to connect with a football team. You have to connect with your fan base. And the way they play, that's the most important thing. Not just the X's and O's and all that. Look, this Ben Johnson, I love him. I absolutely love him. But I'm a better candidate for this job than he would be.
You think you're going to get this job?
Like, that is awesome by Rex. Now, again, they haven't even requested permission to interview Ben Johnson, but the fact that Rex is already on the defensive about it is hilarious. But, Levin, I will say this. unequivocally, Rex Ryan's the best Jets head coach of my lifetime. They got to 2 straight AFC championship games under Rex in 2009 and 2010. They did lose both, but they got there. No other Jets head coach has come anywhere close to that. In fact, they haven't been back to the playoffs since.
Bill Parcells was a better head coach.
Okay, I guess, yeah, he was in my lifetime, 98. Parcells is a better head coach, but he only got to 1 conference championship game. Rex got to 2 back to back.
That is true, but Bill Parcells was the better head coach. I mean, he did have, I think he made the playoffs 3 times as the Jets head coach, I think.
Nope. Once.
No, only once.
He was only
that
there.
magical 98 Vinny Testaverde season.
Yeah, he was only there for 3 years. They went 9-7, 12-4, and 8-8. And then that was it.
And then they had Bill Belichick for half a day.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Just comparing them, Parcells is a better coach than Rex Ryan. But Rex had more success with the Jets than anybody in my lifetime.
Sort of. I mean, they made the playoffs twice as a 9-7 team. And then
they were 11-5 in Rex's second year.
Wow, my memory sucks today.
Yeah, it does.
But yeah, I mean, I get it. They made an NFC championship game twice. I don't think that makes him the better head coach. It was inexcusable that they were in those NFC championship games with AFC championship games with Mark Sanchez as their quarterback, because they literally did nothing in those games and they just barely won crap games, basically.
They had a ridiculous defense. They beat Carson Palmer in the playoffs. They beat Phillip Rivers in the playoffs. This is all in 1 year. And then they lost to Peyton Manning and the Colts. And then the next year to get to the conference championship, I believe they beat Peyton Manning in the wild card. They beat Tom Brady in the divisional round, and they lost in the conference championship game to the Pittsburgh Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger. But I believe their field goal kicker missed, did he miss multiple kicks in that? I may be remembering that one wrong. No, he didn't. That wasn't the game. But they beat Brady and Manning back to back in one of those trips to the AFC championship game.
Like I said, it was weird. You had the comment up there about his brother, Rob Ryan. So I'm going to take that as an opening. I ran into Rob Ryan one time in public. Take a wild guess.
Oh, I assume there was alcohol involved.
Yes, he was the defensive coordinator of the Saints at the time. And I ran into him drunk as a skunk at 2:00 in the morning on Bourbon Street.
Well, if you're on Bourbon Street at 2 a.m.,
I was leaving work and I went, that guy looks like Rob Ryan. And he kept walking and a couple of people came up to him and I was like, no, that is Rob Ryan. And he started stumbling all over the place. I was like, oh, he is really drunk.
One of the weirdest things for me was I was at the Super Bowl one year and we were on Radio Row and Rob Ryan was there. And I was looking at Rob Ryan and then I looked at my phone and it was like, bloop, Rob Ryan gets hired as, I don't know if it was like D coordinator of the Washington team or whatever, linebacker, I don't know, whatever it was, but he got a job as I'm standing there looking at him. It was so weird. I was like, do I go up to him and say congratulations? Like, it was just a very weird scene, but we'll see what happens with the Jets. Like I said, they are interviewing a bunch of people. I agree with you. It is not a very attractive job, but hey, that's their problem, basically, for lack of a better term. The Chicago Bears, we know that they have a head coach opening. They fired Matt Eberflus at the end of November. They have requested interviews with Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, so both coordinators in Detroit. Defensive line coordinator or defensive coordinator for the Dolphins, Anthony Weaver, and they requested an interview with Cardinals offensive coordinator Drew Petzing. So Bears busy. A lot of people think that is sort of an attractive job because of Caleb Williams. Where do you rank the Bears job?
I think it's pretty high up there. I think the Bears would be absolute morons if they don't hire an offensive head coach. Put it that way. If I'm Ben Johnson, though, or if I'm the Bears, I guess I should say, I'm telling Ben Johnson, here's a blank check. Do what you want. You have freedom to do whatever. I will give you control over the roster. You will have final say in the draft. Come be our head coach. Give him the Kyle Shanahan offer.
I would. If you have a number 1 draft pick, at quarterback, that's your biggest job. Everything that your organization does has to be to support that guy and put that guy in the best position to succeed, particularly when they're on their rookie contract. So you're right. I would do exactly what you just said. I agree with you. Is that better? Do you like that I said you were right?
Now, if you're Ben Johnson, what do you do? Because I'm not going to lie. I have a feeling if the Chiefs were to win the Super Bowl, Andy Reid's retiring. First coach to ever win 3 in a row. Perfect. Going out the door, right off into the sunset type of job. So if you're Ben Johnson, you accept the Bears, and then like 3 weeks later, the Chiefs come available, you're going, crap. I could have picked that job.
So that's interesting for a couple of different reasons. One, I do think it's possible that he retires. There were rumors of that being a possibility last year. Although if you're Andy Reid, you know what's better than winning 3 straight Super Bowls? Winning 4. And Patrick Mahomes ain't going anywhere. And it doesn't seem like Steve Spagnuolo is going anywhere either. It's definitely possible, though. See, to me, Ben Johnson is like he's in the ultimate power position because Detroit would love to have him. So he doesn't have to go anywhere. He'll be just as hot of a coaching candidate next year anyway. So he either gets paid the exact contract that he wants to go to the team he wants to go to, or he stays with Detroit, or if he waits it out, like you said, there could be some coaches that made the playoffs this year that get fired. There's always a couple surprise firings or a retirement, like you said. And if Andy Reid did walk away, if Ben Johnson, puts out his feelers to the Chiefs, like, hey, I would love to take that job, then he gets Patrick Mahomes as his head coach. So like he is in the ultimate leverage position right now.
I will say though that if Andy Reid were to retire, I feel like the Chiefs would just promote Spags. They have to do interviews for the Rooney Rule, but I feel like they would just promote Spags. And then, they're like, hey, we have a defensive head coach, but we literally have the most attractive possible job to be an offensive coordinator. So we will be able to find a great offensive coordinator. You know what I mean? Like, hey, we're doing interviews. Do you want to coach Patrick Mahomes?
Right. All of a sudden, yeah, they look really smart. Brisbee Life on Twitch asked the same thing. Would they promote Spags if that happens? He has said he wants to be a head coach again. So, like, he wants a gig somewhere. I don't know. We'd have to wait and see. But you're right. Like, Ben Johnson is in a very, very good position. All right, let's get to some people that weren't fired. We can talk about that. First up, Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen in New York. They are sticking around, which is weird. They were 3-14 this year. They had an 11-game losing streak. And in the announcement or in the press conference where John Mara, the owner, said that we're going to keep them, he also said, quote, I'm running out of patience. So the Giants are running it back with Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen.
I don't know what they're doing because there is a 0.0% chance that they are a winning team next year. So what, you're going to keep them around because they showed improvement and won 6 or 7 games next year? No. So what are you doing? You're wasting your chance. If you're the Giants, you move on and you give Ben Johnson the same offer. Hey, we have a top 5 pick. You get final say. I will let you pick your GM and you get everything you want. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to be the New York market head coach. Mm-hmm. So that would be a somewhat attractive offer. You know what I mean? I don't think it's quite as good as the Bears, but it's a pretty attractive offer to say you have a top 5 pick. You can do whatever you want. If you want to trade picks to get to number 1, I will sign that for you if you can find the deal. If you can go out and pick your GM, you can set up the roster however you want, do whatever you know what I mean? Like, that's a somewhat attractive job because I do think the Giants are closer to turning it around, I would say, than the Jaguars, who are stuck with a mediocre quarterback.
The Giants are one of the blue blood NFL franchises too. I think that is a factor when you're talking about how good of a job somewhere is. Here's the upsetting part if I was a Giants fan. Brian Daboll takes over from Joe Judge, right? Joe Judge was 4-13 in 2021. Daboll and Schoen come in, great. Daboll goes 9-7-1. You make the playoffs. Now you lose in the divisional round, but you made the playoffs. Then they go 6-11. Then this year they go 3-14. So they're getting worse every year of this regime. That's an upsetting trend for me. If I'm an owner of the team, I'm looking at that and I'm like, what is giving me confidence that all of a sudden we're going to get back to where we were? The longer these people have been in control, the worse we've gotten. But
What kind of dirt do they have on Mara? Maybe the Daniel Jones decision was 100% John Mara forcing them to do it, and they were against it. And so Mara is not wanting to fire them because he knows he's the one that screwed them over.
It could be. Remember the whole Saquon Barkley discussion? I mean, it can't feel good that Saquon Barkley, I mean, could have set the all-time rushing record this season after leaving you. That's going to go down. That's an all-time Hard Knocks moment, is that whole discussion about Saquon Barkley. But the Giants decide they're going to run it back, and we'll see what happens there. Speaking of running it back, the Indianapolis Colts are running it back with Chris Ballard, the GM, and Shane Steichen, the head coach. They are 17-17 under Steichen as a head coach, and they are 62-69-1 since Chris Ballard became the GM. They have one playoff appearance. I don't know what the hell Indianapolis is doing.
Speaking of the possibility of having dirt on an owner, that would be an owner very easy to have dirt on. Look, Steichen, I think it's okay to keep him around. Ballard, I do not. But this is the franchise that puts up banners for being an AFC finalist.
For making a conference championship game. Yeah, they literally put up a banner for that. A team with Super Bowl victories put up that banner. So, yeah, you're right. Look, I don't get it with Chris Ballard. Like, people keep trying to say, well, they lost Andrew Luck. They lost Andrew Luck years ago, okay? That excuse has run thin. They brought in Carson Wentz. They chose to bring in Carson Wentz, and then when Carson Wentz didn't work out, they tried to pin all of their problems on it. It was all Carson Wentz. It was all bad. They brought in Matt Ryan. That didn't work out. The only quarterback they brought in that was moderately successful was Phillip Rivers. They at least got to a wild card game with Phillip Rivers at quarterback. Everybody else they have brought in, Gardner Minshew, just disaster. And now they got Anthony Richardson, who, I'm sorry, he can't throw the damn ball. He doesn't know where the hell it's going.
No, it certainly looks like Richardson's confidence is shot. I don't see the same quarterback that I did when he was a rookie before the injury. When he was a rookie, like, he wasn't great at passing, don't get me wrong, but there wasn't hesitation. Now I see hesitation in him, and that reeks of a quarterback that lost their confidence.
He completed 47.7% of his passes this year. 47% of his passes. That is, in today's NFL, that is so bad. Look at it this way. Everybody wanted to run Trey Lance out of San Francisco. Trey Lance completed 48.4% of his passes in 2022. So Richardson was even less than Trey Lance, which is wild. And if you look at the quotes coming out of the Colts organization, DeForest Buckner, we played as individuals, not as a team. All the stuff about Richardson not being a professional before he got benched and not putting in the time. DeForest Buckner had to go to Anthony Richardson, according to an article in The Athletic, and be like, hey, dude, I signed an extension here because I believed in you. You got to hold up your end of the bargain. Like, that is an indictment of their quarterback picking process, and it's an indictment on the head coach who's letting this stuff slide.
I'll give you a comparison for him. Jake Locker.
Ooh.
Jake Locker, top 5 pick by the Tennessee Titans. What's it been? Probably 12, 13 years ago. As a rookie, he showed promise because he was scrambling for a bunch of first downs, and he was moving the chains. You know, that was in the Titans finishing right at 500 constantly with Fisher. And there was potential there. And then he got hurt. And then he came back and he was worse. And he couldn't complete 50% of his passes. And within 3 years, he was out of the NFL. So that's what he seems like he is right now. Somebody that came in and his feet made it show promise. And then he got hurt. And when he came back, he was not the same guy at all.
So the Colts are running it back. I have a feeling next year, January 6th, 2026, we'll be talking about the Colts making changes at GM and head coach. But for now, they are sticking with the current regime. Last team that is not firing their head coach and their GM, that would be the Miami Dolphins. Jeffrey Ross, the owner there, said that Mike McDaniel and Chris Grier are safe. McDaniel is 28-23 as a head coach, 2 playoff appearances, but no playoff wins. Grier, I believe they are 75-73 under Greer as a GM. You've also got Tyreek Hill, who basically pulled himself out of the game last week. And then after the game was basically like, I'm out of here. I could understand the Dolphins wanting to give it another year with Mike McDaniel, but I could also understand them if they decided to make a change.
I don't think you move on from Mike McDaniel. This season was not his fault. I think you still saw glimpses of the team that they were when he actually had his quarterback and Tyreek Hill healthy at the same time, which was almost never this season. So I don't see how you could move on from McDaniel. And if you're keeping the head coach, I think it's really hard to move on from the GM and try to keep the head coach. That doesn't tend to work out well. It's also a big offseason. So I don't think this is an offseason where the Dolphins can say, all right, we're getting rid of Greer and we're going to go 2 weeks without a GM. That's part of it. Like, they can't afford to not have a GM for the next 2 weeks because they got to figure out Tyreek Hill now.
That's going to be an interesting situation. Here's the thing, though. I feel like so many people are like, well, Mike McDaniel, his quarterback got hurt. Okay, but he's the guy that chose to stick with Tua. Tua had injury concerns coming into the league before he ever played a snap in the NFL. There were injury concerns about Tua. When he got to the league, he got more injury concerns with the concussions, and the Dolphins still chose to pay him. So unless Mike McDaniel was standing on the table saying, no, please don't pay Tua, and the Dolphins did it anyway, which I can guarantee did not happen, he doesn't get off the hook for not being able to win games without Tua or for Tua getting hurt. You stuck with this guy, so you have to wear that. And the fact is, without Tua, they can't beat anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I also, paying Tua, I don't understand. The drafting and sticking by Tua before he was paid big money, I can get that. Like, there was potential there. There was a reason that he was a high draft pick. So I don't necessarily agree with it there. I do disagree with paying him, and especially paying him without, like, if you're going to pay him, he is the person in NFL history that you say, all right, we'll pay you, but we have an out after every single year because of your injury history. And I also think he is the person in the NFL right now that his team secretly prays he retires because it would solve all the problems.
Lee Ving says it's still a Tua health and performance problem. Baziman says if the Dolphins are foolish enough to fire McDaniel, I can see the Bears or Giants going after him in a heartbeat. I agree that he would probably be able to get another head coaching job pretty quickly. But I will say this. If you are coaching in Miami and then you got to become a head coach in New York or Chicago in the winter, that is a rough transition. I'm just saying. I don't know.
I'll say this. McDaniel, I don't think, is cut out for the New York media because they will eat you up and they will come after you for anything that's different. And he is definitely an oddball.
They would love him if he won. It would be, there'd be so many pieces on his quirky personality and all this. But the second it started to go bad because he doesn't conform to a lot of norms for NFL head coaches, you're right. The fish would eat, or the vultures would swarm. Is that what I'm thinking of?
I was going to say the fish would eat is a bad analogy to use because we're talking about him leaving the Dolphins.
That's true. Although dolphin is not a fish.
Well, yeah.
It's a mammal. I mean, just let's get our facts straight on the show. Facts first here on the Gold Standard NFL show. So those are the coaching situations right now. Obviously, things can change. We should talk about this just because a lot of people here know us, obviously, from our 49ers coverage. The Jets requested permission to interview Brian Griese. Do you have any worry that if let's say Brian Griese left to take that job or a different job as a Niner fan, how big of a deal do you think that would be?
I give Griese a lot of credit. I think he's clearly a good quarterbacks coach. He is the one that made the call on Purdy by all reports. I guess we've never quite seen it. I don't think it's officially been confirmed, but there's been a ton of reports that Griese was the one that wanted Purdy and convinced him to draft him. I think he is absolutely deserving of a promotion, and that's not possible with the 49ers. So if I'm Griese, I take any opportunity that's not the 49ers so that you can have a chance to move up, because it's kind of a similar situation to McDaniel, where McDaniel couldn't get the credit he deserved because everybody gives it to Shanahan. So at the same time, he's just the quarterback coach, and it's Kyle Shanahan that's the head coach. So would there be a loss from losing him? Maybe slightly. I would say that the loss would be more so that I think Greasy at this point is somebody that Kyle Shanahan will listen to, and there's nobody else in that building that is a coach that he will listen to, in my opinion. So the problem is if he goes, who do you have to check Kyle Shanahan?
I think the Shanahan listens to Bobby Turner. I just don't know how much Bobby Turner checks Kyle. He might just agree with everything that Kyle wants to go along with. John Lynch has said that the two people most responsible for Brock Purdy are Steve Slowick, who was in the pro department, the pro personnel department, and Brian Greasy. Lynch said Greasy was incredibly impressed once we kind of gave Brock to him. Basically, I feel like here's how it kind of works in general with the 49ers. They decide what positions they want to go after. I'm pretty sure Kyle said, like, hey, let's look at a quarterback in the late rounds. The 49ers scouts and personnel people pick out the people that they like. They kick it up to the people above them, meaning Greasy. And then if Greasy approves it, he kicks it up to Kyle, and then Kyle gets the final approval. But it was basically Slowick and Greasy that found Brock. And, I mean, look, I know this year wasn't a great year, but it has worked out incredibly well for the 49ers with Brock Purdy. So Greasy does deserve a ton of credit. I don't know. I would be very curious to see who they would get to replace Greasy if he did leave. I also, the Niners have lost a lot of coaches over the past few years. And one of the nice parts about having a crap season like the Niners had, nobody wants your coaches for the most part. They leave you alone. When you win, they pick you apart like a friggin' something that gets picked apart a lot. I don't know. I can't finish the analogy, but a continuity for a coaching staff is important. So maybe I'd like to see Greasy stick around.
I would like to see him stick around. I do think like I said, he's a good coach. I don't think it's that huge of a loss for any quarterback coach to get hired away. I will say that by hiring him away, it guarantees that there's going to be fresh blood brought in on the offensive side of the ball. Mm-hmm. And I like that potential. I don't know that it's a guarantee that Kyle would actually hire somebody with experience. I think he likes having an offensive staff that doesn't have much experience outside of himself. You know what I mean? He likes not necessarily yes man. I guess that's the wrong way to put it. He likes people that only know his system. He doesn't want outside views. So I don't know that it would end up working out, but I do want to see fresh blood in that offense. And if I'm Brian Greasy, if Kyle goes out and does what I'm hoping, which is bring in an experienced offensive coordinator, even though they won't become the play caller, get a different person in there that has experience doing that. As Brian Greasy, I'm saying, well, hold on here. I'm the one that's deserving of a promotion. I've done everything right. If you're giving the title of offensive coordinator to somebody, it should be me.
And maybe they do. I mean, they certainly can do that if they want to. It's up to them. By the way, speaking of the 49ers, I just saw this. Isaac Garendo tweeted, ACL is good. Thank you, God. I'll be back better than ever. That is excellent news because he had a very scary injury in the game on Sunday. It looked like a knee and an ankle. It was one of those ugly looking things where you get twisted up and it looked really, really bad. They immediately took the card out and ruled him out. So I was worried there. Obviously, he still has a knee injury, which of course is bad, but at least it's not a devastating ACL injury. So that's a little good news for the 49ers here on Black Monday.
Yep, certainly good news. I'm ready for more good news, and they have not announced anything with the coaching staff. And that's what I think we're all waiting on.
So Kyle Shanahan did say after the game, and I thought this was sort of a hint that changes are coming, because right after the first thing he always does is the injuries from the game. And then right after he finished the injuries for the game, he said, look, I know you guys have a job to do. You're going to ask about coaches and players and their future. He said, I have a job to do too. I have to finish this thing out right, which to me, he didn't say it, but in so many words, to me, he said, look, when you're going to replace somebody and make a change, you don't announce it to the media before you talk to them. You talk to them first. You let them know first privately, and then we can talk to the media and make changes. Kyle said he expects to talk to the media again later in the week. So I respect Kyle for doing that. I don't respect the 49ers beat for not asking about it anyway. They absolutely should have. But it sounds to me, according to Kyle, like, hey, he's going to go through the exit interviews. He's going to talk to people. He'll let them know first, and then we'll see some changes. I expect a change at special teams coordinator with Brian Schneider, and I expect a new defensive coordinator in installed for next year. I don't think Nick Sorensen's back as the DC. Maybe he gets another job, maybe special teams coordinator, who knows? But I don't think Sorensen will be back. Matt Mayoko said on a YouTube video he doesn't expect Nick Sorensen to be back. So if the Niners are going to make changes, we should find out later this week.
Yeah, I mean, that is their MO. They do like the exit interviews to be able to be done. We're going to find out here in the next, I would say by the time we do our gold standard show on Thursday, we're going to know.
I hope so. That'd be nice for us, for the numbers, selfishly from a business perspective. But I do think they're going to make changes. But I think just the fact that Kyle said that, you don't say it. Like, if you're going to bring Sorensen back and Schneider back, you just say it. You don't need to have a meeting with them. You just say it. They're back. Boom. Sorensen and Schneider are not going to be mad if they find out they're going to be back immediately following the last game of the season. So the fact that he didn't say that, to me, means there's going to be a coaching change. Multiple possible.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of coaching changes for the 49ers, just not the top one.
Right. All right, before we go, let's quickly talk about the MVP race. Some people think Josh Allen. Some people say Lamar Jackson. I talked about Joe Burrow, to me, having a legitimate argument to be the most valuable player, because where would Cincinnati be without him? Where do you come down on the MVP race?
Joe Burrow shouldn't get a single vote. He has a MVP caliber season in a normal year. This year, there are two people without a doubt clearly better than him. And if you're doing a third vote, it's going to be Saquon Barkley, not Burrow. You don't vote for the third best quarterback. Burrow had a tremendous season. He led the league in passing yards. He had 43 touchdowns and less than 10 interceptions. In probably, I would say 70% of seasons, that's your MVP. But in this year, you have Josh Allen and you have Lamar Jackson. That's the real debate. And to me, I think there is a clear winner, and it has changed with the way the end of the season went. To me, it has to be Lamar Jackson.
Lamar had an historic season, an incredible, ridiculous season.
I got some statistics for you if you don't have them.
4,172 passing yards for Lamar, 41 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Nobody had ever thrown 40-plus touchdowns in a season with that few interceptions ever in the history of football. The guy that Bill Polian said should be a wide receiver when he came into the league just threw for 41 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. And, oh, by the way, has the most rushing yards all time of any quarterback in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, in their career. Look, Josh Allen has, I would say, probably a top 10 quarterback season. It's in the conversation of being one of the 10 best.
All time.
Lamar Jackson has a top 3 all time, in my opinion. Here's some things. So you already mentioned the only quarterback ever to have 40-plus passing touchdowns with 4 or less interceptions. He also has the lowest interception percentage of any 40-plus touchdown season. He also has the 4th best QB rating of all time. And he had the 7th lowest interception percentage ever for a quarterback with at least 400 attempts in a season. Like, he had 40-plus passing touchdowns with one of the best interception percentage seasons of all time. Oh, and by the way, he ran for 900-plus yards. When you look at Allen's numbers to Jackson's numbers, that's when I think it becomes, all right, the only reason why you wouldn't vote for Jackson is because he's already won 2 MVPs. Jackson had 400 more passing yards. Jackson had 400 more rushing yards. Jackson had more total touchdowns. He had 45 touchdowns to only 40 for Allen. And he had less interceptions. So you have less interceptions, more total touchdowns, more passing yards, and more rushing yards. What's the argument for Allen?
Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen, I will say more than and I'm not saying Lamar doesn't do this, but I know with Josh Allen, like, some of those numbers came from insane, amazing plays. The stats will tell you that a quarterback threw a 30-yard completion. They don't tell you that he rolled to his right, jumped in the air, and fired a laser back. Again, I'm not saying Lamar doesn't make amazing plays, because he clearly does. But I think that a lot of the momentum for Josh Allen and being the MVP comes from the fact that so many of his plays are absolutely incredible. But the Lamar stuff, look, I don't care that he's won 2 MVPs before that. Was he the MVP this year? Did he have the best year? Yes or no? If it's going to be his second MVP, third MVP, fourth MVP, I don't care. I don't care. I don't have like voter fatigue like that. I know that is a real thing, but if he deserves it, to me, he deserves it. And it would be his third MVP, and he's 27 years old. Think how crazy that
when
is.
he was a restricted free agent, every single team in the NFL said, I don't want to even negotiate with you.
Right. We don't even want to sit down and see what he wants. Nope. They made public announcements immediately. Oh, no, we're not going after the like what? Absurd. Collusion. It was collusion then. We said it then at the time. It clearly was. And the Ravens get the benefit of that, as he is just unbelievable. And here's the part that annoys me. We know Lamar has struggled in the playoffs. And if he loses again, even if he plays well, if they lose, people are going to try and act like this wasn't an historic season. They're going to minimize it. Oh, so what? He didn't win in the playoffs. No, this is an all-time quarterback year. Think of how many great quarterbacks we have seen. Joe Montana, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Steve Young. None of them had a year like he just had. None of them. And to minimize...
And you're talking about none of them had a passing season like him. And then you add in the rushing on top of that.
Absolutely. So credit to Lamar. I have no problem. I think I would give it to Lamar. My only thing with Burrow is, like, to me, he has an argument. Like, it's not crazy if you gave it to Joe Burrow, because Joe Burrow just had an insane year as well, especially when you consider.
It is crazy when you look at what Lamar Jackson did. I get what you're saying. Joe Burrow, if he was not on Cincinnati, they're picking number 1 overall. I don't think there's any argument against that. But when you're looking at it, as great as Burrow was and as valuable as he is to that team, Lamar Jackson is right there with them in value. And he had an historic season, not just a season that should win MVP in most years.
And Joe Burrow had arguably 200 more passing attempts than Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
So Lamar, in terms of efficiency, in terms of maximizing the attempts that he did have, was obviously very, very good.
And if you want to get into it, you can talk about how Burrow has Jamar Chase, who might be the best NFL wide receiver right now.
Yeah, but a lot of quarterbacks that won MVPs have good wide receivers too. Bazzyman says Lamar is the only player so far in NFL history with multiple MVPs to have not played in a Super Bowl, and I don't think he'll be in a Super Bowl anytime soon. But the MVP is a regular season award too. Let's not lose sight of that. It doesn't have anything to do with your playoff success. It's that shouldn't factor into it at all.
When Peyton Manning was 27, he had multiple MVPs and had not played in a Super Bowl.
Really? Are you saying that Bazzyman's putting out false information?
No, it's true now, because Peyton Manning's career went on and he played in a Super Bowl. So he had multiple MVPs. But my point is at this stage of their careers, Peyton Manning was in the same boat.
What year did they win the Super Bowl?
2007, I think. 2006 season, 2007 Super Bowl. It was the awesome Rex Grossman.
They won the Super Bowl in 2006. Peyton Manning's second MVP. I just want to double check this since you brought it up. His second MVP came in 2004. So he did have 2 MVPs, and they did not win a Super Bowl.
They had not been to a Super Bowl. That's
right.
What he said. So, yes, Peyton Manning met that at this stage of Lamar's career.
Yeah. So, anyway, congratulations, Lamar Jackson. You're the man. Keep kicking ass. Don't let anybody try and tell you that what you did is not incredible. It absolutely was incredible. I know I'll be rooting hard for the Ravens. I certainly don't want to see the Chiefs three-peat, but at least the Chiefs won't beat the 49ers in the Super Bowl this year. That much we know. That's going to do it. Oh, sorry.
Let's just real quick. Out of all the teams in the playoffs, who do you want to see win the Super Bowl the most? Who are you rooting for?
That is a good question. I hadn't taken a look at it. Let me just check the playoff bracket. I think I'm going to say Buffalo. I'm going to go with the Bills. 1, we know about the 4 straight Super Bowls and all that. 2, I think Josh Allen gets so much slander just because Patrick Mahomes exists, and I don't think it's deserved at all. I think Josh Allen is an incredible quarterback. I think he clearly played better than Patrick Mahomes this year, without a doubt. And because he hasn't been able to beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, people act like he's not that good. He's incredible and amazing. So I think I'm going to go with the Bills.
The Bills are a very close second. I prefer the Ravens because I like Lamar. I think it was BS how they handled it in the draft. I mean, you literally had Bill Polian saying I wouldn't even let him play quarterback.
Right.
It's BS how his restricted free agency went. So I think the NFL has been against him every step of the way. So I want to see him quiet this choker type narrative that's building and go out and win a Super Bowl. And the NFL has to have the face of the NFL becoming somebody like Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, Lamar definitely faced some things that other quarterbacks have not faced. I wouldn't be mad if Baltimore won it, but John Harbaugh beat the 49ers to get a Super Bowl, so I'm not looking for him to have any more Super Bowl success.
It doesn't hurt that I live in Pittsburgh, and so they would be in misery.
Right. So you're just rooting for the misery of others. Okay, you're a great human being.
I don't want to have to sit around others. Like, I don't want Pittsburgh winning the Super Bowl because I don't want to have to deal with that being everywhere.
Don't worry. That is not something that is going to come to fruition anytime soon. I would say I wouldn't mind seeing Baker Mayfield. I love Baker Mayfield. I love his personality. I think it's fun.
I get it. He is the type of person, if he was on my team, I would love him, but I can't stand him.
Fair enough. I like the way he plays the game. I like the personality, the fire, all that stuff. I love the fact that he dressed up like Brett Favre before the draft in the old school jorts, the jean shorts. Yeah. Remember that? Like, that was he just seems like a fun person to me. They're not going to win the Super Bowl, but whatever.
Let me give you one other scenario. I'm curious if you would like this. Would you enjoy seeing the Vikings make the Super Bowl but lose so that Florio has to know what you've gone through twice in recent years?
Maybe, but here's the thing. As a Vikings fan, Mike has experienced plenty of pain also. He's no stranger to pain, as Vikings fans would tell you. But I would rather root for somebody to succeed than root for them to fail, to be honest. So good luck, Lamar. Good luck, Buffalo Bills. We'll be here covering it all. The NFL shows every Monday here on the Gold Standard YouTube channel. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. Follow Levin on the socials @TakesByLevin. Follow me @StatsOnFire. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, everybody. We'll talk soon.